So you just saw Kismet, and I would like to have a warm applause for the director of the film, Nina Maria Paschalidou. Nina. And also for the professor of media culture and citizenship, Joke Hermes. Have a seat. And Nina, congratulations with your film. Good to have you here at IDFA. Did you yourself grow up watching soaps?
No, not really.
No?
I mean, some, but they were more Western soap operas. Like I think Dynasty and Dallas were in fashion back then. So
yes,
those were the ones. And then I've watched some growing up through my grandmother, who watches them very much, and that's how I got the idea for this film as well, because she watches them. She watched.
Yeah, maybe we can put the mic a little bit harder.
Sorry.
You just put it. Yeah, right.
Is this better? Okay. So my grandmother watches them a lot, and that's how I got the idea for this.
What was your initial idea when you started the film? What were your opinions on soap operas and how they influenced viewers?
I could see that they did influence, because, I mean, for example, in Greece we had this one soap opera called The Shining or something like that. Then it did influence. It's a very funny title. It did influence a whole generation, I think, of people and women very much. And it was like the first Greek soap opera to do that. So I mean, I was aware that they're influential, but I really started reading about them when I got familiar with the Turkish soap operas. I was in the States, and a Turkish friend of mine first came to me and told me, because he knew I was a filmmaker, you should really look into this Turkish soap opera phenomenon. It was an article, I think back then in the New York Times, that talked about their influence in the Middle East, and I found it very interesting. And then when I came back to Greece for Christmas, I realized that my grandmother was watching them all day long, and the entire Greece was, and then I was reading, and the Balkans were too. So it just all kind of made sense in the end. There was something about it that was very interesting and very influential.
Joke, how differently do we appreciate soap operas if you compare our country, for example, with Turkey and Greece? And
I don't think the difference is all that big, actually. What we share is the soap opera invites us to what some theorists have called emotional realism. So we recognize, even though they're vastly exaggerated, we recognize scenes that could have been from our lives or the lives of women that we know. So,
but they tend to take it really very literally, if that's a correct word. Like if the man is not so romantic in the houses as we see on the screen, that they react upon it. Is that different?
I love that about the film. It seemed, for me, it merged what literary novels did for the Dutch women's movement in the 1960s.
Yeah.
The Shame is Over Now, titles like that. With what popular culture can do, how it can speak to big audiences about really important and sensitive issues. That was not your question. Your question was taking them literally.
Yes.
Well, emotional realism is a form of realism. It feels absolutely natural and true to life. But apart from emotional realism, I suppose I would like to hear from you how you found your informants, because I really loved them. They were a great set of people. And I can imagine that some of them came from backgrounds where they would have less education or weren't as, well, we're all very television savvy. We know what television is about, and we've seen so much of it. But of course, 40 years ago, people would talk differently about television series here as well.
Well, there was a lot there.
Sorry.
Just take it in one step. About the viewers that we found in this film. Well, first of all, I have to say something about the Turkish soap operas that made them very, as you saw in the film, makes them very special for the women in the Arab countries and in the Middle East. They're a little bit different to the other soap operas they've watched so far, because they talk about Muslim women, and so it's not something unfamiliar to them. It's something very, very familiar to them, and so it makes them think that even more that, oh my God, I can be that woman. That's me there. That's my problems. This is my mother talking to me. This is my husband, treating me, in this way, and it makes it even more influential. And it was very interesting when we were filming this documentary. Of course, like you said before, the audience, they don't know these actors by their real names. They know them as Mohamed and Noor, and this is how they refer to them. It's like they're in their homes every day. And especially in these countries, like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and even Iran, where actually there's a big issue about the soap operas. They take out the antenna so that women won't watch them. They consider them to be evil. Their fatwas are issued against them. Especially there, they open up this new window to women that never leave the home, really. They have no contact with the outside world. And that's a little bit different to the women in the Balkans, for example, where the influence is a little bit different, too.
I was quite surprised how explicit some scenes were. I wouldn't have thought they could be on television in the more...
They are in most countries. In some countries, they're censored, and they show a little bit less of the rape, for example, or of the very violent scenes in the Child Bride. But I mean, they do show them, because when I was in the Emirates in Abu Dhabi, they showed the Child Bride, the Life Goes On series, and they show everything. So it's because these are private channels, and they can do a little bit more than
the public.
Yeah, exactly.
HBO of the Arab world. Or
yeah. Joke, we see, namely, like the influence on women. Are men immune for soap operas?
No, they're not. They like to think they are.
Oh.
So this should be discussed in private, women only, actually.
Yeah.
No, but men are as much affected by television in general and by soap operas as well. In fact, what I hear from Turkish friends here in the Netherlands is that these types of series, the soap series, have turned into family television much more than the Gumish is an early series, right? They made it almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the series that are made now are watched by men and women, as you've shown so well that all these couples are watching the series together. And I suppose they do extend a very nice invitation to men, don't they? To be, well, a particular type of friendly, heroic character. Well, who could refuse that kind of...
I think it's interesting with men. When we were filming in Egypt, they were there, and they do watch them. They just would leave the room when the cameras were there. They just didn't want to admit that they were watching them. And it was fun, even observing some of them. They laugh about them, but they like them. It's like it's a family thing. They sit around the television, and of course they watch the news as well. But it's there. It's in their homes.
I guess it's a huge responsibility for the writers of these series to put these taboos on television and to be and having so much influence on women. Did you see how they worked with that? And
I mean, we did a bit. It was very interesting because when we started looking for the screenwriters of the series, we didn't know there were women. We were just looking for the screenwriters, and then on the way we found out that they were all women. Which, I mean, all of them. So it made sense. And then, as you saw there, and also in the Life Goes On series, they collaborated with NGOs for women's rights and for child marriages to work on the script. So they do know that their work is important. They're aware of what they're doing. And of course, it didn't start that way. When when it started 10 years ago, they didn't really think that, this series is going to change. Women is going to have some sort of influence. But now they do know. And I think now they work on that even more. Like Fatma Gül, for example, that women who were abused were there during the last scene, the court scene. And I think that's important, and that's what makes them a little bit more powerful than before, than just randomly making them and having the soap operas on TV.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience? Don't feel afraid to raise up your hands and ask your question. Yes, there is one over there. There will be a microphone. You see it? Yes, on the other side. Could you raise one more time your hand? Yeah, and the microphone will be coming your way. And if you could just say to who you would like to ask the question, Joke of Nina Maria. The filmmaker, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very interesting film, but I wondered, you only showed the viewers in upper classes, in wealthy families or middle-class families. Do this series, as you mentioned, they're shown on the private channels, are seen in poor circles, and poor people. Do they see these series as well, and what influence does it have in these in these areas?
Yes, I mean, not all the women in the film are upper class. Samira comes from a very poor family. She just became a little bit more famous because she's an activist, and she came out and talked about her virginity test. She's not from an upper class family, and but it's about, and she's not from Cairo. We just met her in Cairo because she wouldn't agree for us to go to her hometown because she would just be in a lot of trouble if we did. And then Badi Sabah, of course, lives in Istanbul, in the outskirts of Istanbul, but again, she's very poor. She doesn't have any money. And like you said, these are watched by rich and poor women and poor families everywhere in the Middle East. And they're even more popular there. We didn't go there because when we were looking for these viewers, we just didn't, we didn't get someone to accept us to do that. These are very difficult homes to film in and penetrate. And this is also the power of the soap operas, like I said before, because they enter these homes. It's TV, nobody really pays a lot of attention. So the fathers, they allow their daughters to watch them. And that's how some changes is made. But yes, of course, they're watched in all classes.
Yeah, Joke, is it difficult to see how soap operas really influence people? Is that difficult to measure?
Well, we don't really know how to measure these things, as culture is such a rich and diverse. Well, it's not one thing; it's many things. So to single out just the soap opera and then find out what does it actually do, that's very difficult. But the other way around, when you talk with people and in research, in qualitative audience research, what we do find is overwhelming evidence that soap operas, like other popular forms, are really important. But soap operas, mainly for their very deep emotional appeal and their total soap operas never hesitate to be really fully tragically realist, and that is a real gift to a viewer. There are no rules about how to behave properly. I mean, all emotions are allowed. There's
a lot of freedom within the
yeah.
Are there more questions? Yeah, two. There's one over here that's close by. Where's the microphone? And there's one over there. So where you could go first, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your beautiful film. It's very good for me to watch as well, because my mother watches Turkish series all day long here in Holland, and now I know why. Why she has changed the last couple of years. Anyway, I wanted to know whether are there any subjects that are taboo for the filmmakers, because, as you know, Turkey is of course also politically an interesting country. Let me put it like that. Are there things that can't be shown? Is it, for example, possible to make a series about the Kurdish women in Turkey?
Yeah, is everything possible within the Turkish soap?
I think they're getting there, because if I'm not mistaken, there's one series that talks about a Kurdish man who... Maybe you know a little bit more about that. No,
I don't know that. I can't pronounce the titles. It's terrible. But I've heard about the Armenian question being raised in a soap opera, which is politically speaking pretty progressive, of gay couples being shown on television, naked to the waist, but still sort of in
yeah, and this one series that I was talking about talks about this Kurdish city called Batman, where honor crimes take place, and they don't really tell the story of an honor crime, of the murder of a girl, because this is what happens there. But it talks about a man who escapes, and it's from the point of view of the man, which makes it even more interesting, who escapes this very closed society, and he totally disagrees with everything. He doesn't want to get married to a girl from his town. He goes to Istanbul and he tries to change his life. So in a way, they are opening up to the world. They're opening up their issues to the world, and that's a little bit of soft politics, of course.
I suppose what's interesting is that here in the Netherlands, we wouldn't think of soap opera as a very political or politically conscious type of television, but the Turkish soap makers were also clearly influenced by the South American tradition of making telenovelas, soaps, and they're very highly political. They are very much a forum for discussing all sorts of questions, whether they're social or political or more to do with intimate relationships, they all are shown there. And I do think they do also lean on that particular tradition, not solely, for instance, the American tradition, which is rather prudish.
Yeah. One more question over here.
I liked it. It was a big surprise to see people kissing in the Turkish film, because I was a long time ago in a country where all the kisses were cut out.
Yeah. Where was that?
Oh, that was about 30 years ago in Pakistan.
In Pakistan.
When we saw American films, and then you saw Doris Day kissing, greeting her neighbor, and then you saw them moving back because they cut out the kiss. Because of all what happens in the soap operas, it was already mentioned that in the Emirates it was shown on a private channel. Is it also, for example, in Turkey, Greece, is it there shown on the public channels?
Well,
No.
the open commercial
Yeah, the
channels, and
open-
people download
The-
these series as well. I mean, as with all kinds of visual material, they're available throughout the world.
Yeah,
So they find their audiences. Not to worry.
No, but that I mean with that is the how do you say that? The board so liberal that they show it on the public TV channels.
Yeah, are they so liberal in Turkey that they show it everywhere? Is it like accepted to watch these kind of scenes?
Yeah,
and
it is. It's shown everywhere. I mean, it's on TV. It's on.
Are there ever protests against it?
I mean, yes. There's been protests on various subjects, but mainly on Suleiman the Magnificent. But the reason was different. It was because they were making a series, a soap opera on the life of Suleiman the Magnificent.
That's more political.
And it was political. It was the question there was, and Erdogan made a statement on this series as well. He said that it's not possible for Suleiman the Magnificent to be in the harem all the time. He was away for war fighting. he wasn't really dealing with all the women's affairs. So mainly that. And there's been demonstrations like you saw in Greece, but they're all political demonstrations.
Yeah.
The negative reactions on this were more in countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia, where there's a big dispute on the soap operas and whether or not they should be broadcasted or banned, actually. Yeah. And there's a big discussion going on, like the antennas that I told you. They take out the antennas for various other, of course, TV shows, but the Turkish soap operas as well.
Are there any more questions? Over there, one in the back.
Yes, you already mentioned that all the women, or the writers were women. Do you have an explanation for that?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I think in my opinion is, and I think they say that in the interviews as well, is that they're telling their own lives. I mean, the girls from the wrote Gümüş, they were telling their own story, and of course with a little bit of imagination and fantasy, and it is soap opera. But I think they're telling their own story, and it's the story of Turkish women today who are, right there. They're crossing over to modernization, to westernization, and they're still struggling with tradition and who they really are, and they're trying to balance that. And I think this is what the soap operas are about. This is why they are so influential, I think, in the Arab countries.
And what keeps men from telling their stories through soap opera?
What keeps them, sorry?
Yeah, what keeps them from not telling their stories through soap opera?
They have so many other formats.
They have a long way to go, I think.
So.
Are there more questions? Yeah, one more question over here. In the middle. Do you see where it is? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I have to say that the producers are men.
The producers are men.
And the ones who put in the money for this are men.
Yeah.
So.
If there's money involved.
Also,
there
my
they
compliments for the documentary. I really enjoyed watching it. But I was also very interested in in the broadcast networks, because when you send out a series like this in the Arab world, for example, you do take a statement as a network, I think, TV broadcast. I mean, did you... did they get a lot of, criticism about sending these kind of series? I mean, because it's not a Turkish broadcast, I think.
It's NBC, which in the Arab countries it's NBC, which is Al Arabiya. I mean, it's a branch of. It has Al Arabiya. I'm sorry. We did speak with them. I mean, we didn't interview them, but we did speak with them, and they had a lot of letters of reaction. There's reactions about the soap operas everywhere. In Greece, one of the CEOs in Antenna TV was telling us that they receive, hundreds of letters saying that you shouldn't be, screening this, broadcasting this. This is trash. This is Turkish trash. You shouldn't be having it on TV.
Politically, they do take a statement by sending
too.
It.
Yeah. So there are reactions, yes, but on the other hand, they're very popular. I mean, this series have an audience of 300 million people, and it's a huge industry. And the Turkish producers are making so much money out of this.
And you shouldn't forget that. It's also just soap opera. It's not something that you're supposed to take really very seriously. I mean, that's the No. That's not what I mean to say. If, as a television network, you say we're not going to broadcast this soap, you're also saying this is important stuff. It does things to people. Something's happening here. It's also giving it a status you may not want to give it.
Are there any more questions? Well, then I would like to thank you for being here both. Mag ik een warm applaus, a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Nina Maria Paschalidou en Joke Hermes. Dank jullie wel. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful festival and hope to see you around. Goodbye.